Hello, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's session. My name is Paige McDonough. I am a Career Development Officer at QCDC, and today, along with my colleague, Dr. Hamdan Al-Naimi, we will be going through how to write a personal statement. So guidelines for today's session. We are recording this session, but your participation is encouraged. There is a Q&A function which we encourage you to ask questions. As I mentioned, my colleague Dr. Hamda will be responding to those questions or asking me those questions, so we want to ensure that you do engage throughout the session, so please feel free to utilize that Q&A function. In addition, we have a few QR codes where we will ask some polls. So if you have your mobile phone handy, keep it near you. That way you can access those QR codes. If you are viewing this presentation on your mobile phone, we will put the link in the Q&A function so that you can access it from there. And then at the end of today's session, we will have a quick survey where you can provide feedback for how you felt today's session went. So please do take the time before you leave to provide some feedback for us. So what we are going to cover in today's session, first thing is we'll discuss a little bit about personal statement versus personal essay. Then we're going to cover why and how a personal statement is utilized in your applications. Then we'll talk about how to prepare to write your own personal statement, what to include in that personal statement. I'll go through a nice outline for how to structure your personal statement, and then we'll take a look at some examples and go through some tips. So first, before we get started, I do want to tell you a little bit about who QCDC is. You may or may not have heard about us. QCDC is a shortened way to say Qatar Career Development Center. We are based out at Education City, and our goal is to help Qatar's youth, such as yourself, reach their educational and career goals through a variety of different initiatives, such as today's workshop. We also work with counselors at schools, we work with academics, we work with parents and other influencers, but our main goal is to work with students such as yourself. I also want to just mention, I would encourage you all to connect with us on our different platforms that we've got. So we have LinkedIn, we've got YouTube. Both of these platforms, we've got recorded sessions, or you can read tips about what to do in an interview or various career development experiences throughout your life. So take a look at our LinkedIn profile as well as our YouTube channel. And then on our website, we have a suite of different resources available for you. Things like our Career Guide magazine, which you can download the free app. It goes through interviews with people who work in the field if you want to explore different career paths, as well as a lot of really valuable resources. So I would encourage you all to connect with us in one or more ways to access all of the resources that we have available for you. Okay, so to start with, I would like to learn a little bit more about those of you who are on today. So I know you're preparing for your applications. I'd like to know where you plan on applying, not what uni, but what geographic region are you planning on applying to. So if you've got your mobile phone handy, open up the camera app and just hover it over the QR code. It will bring up the poll, and there you can submit your vote. If, again, you are viewing today's session on your mobile phone, the link for the QR code for the survey is just in the chat, so you can click and access that there. Once you have voted, and you can vote multiple times, it will show you a graph to see what everyone has voted for. So take a second, tell me what country or what geographic region you're planning on applying to, and submit your vote. So it looks like we've got 14% Canada, 16% Qatar, 15% Europe, 15% Asia, 11% UK, 8% Australia, 8% US, some others. I see more votes still coming in. Looks like so far about 17% say Asia, 15% Qatar, 13% Europe. Lovely. Still more votes coming in. So it looks like everyone is planning to study in different regions around the world, which is really exciting to see. I will talk briefly today that our presentation will cover the personal statement mostly, which is UK based, but the information I will talk about today can be applied across any different application. So keep that in mind, even though it might be UK specific, the information that you learn today can still be applied for any application. So just briefly, I want to touch on the differences. So the UK personal statement, for example, is demonstration of your interest in the selected course that you are applying for. So as I mentioned, this will be today's feature that we will talk about. The US personal essay is a bit different. It is a response to a prompt where you have more opportunity to demonstrate your personality within that essay. And then the EU motivational letter is similar, but demonstration of why you are the perfect candidate for that university. So my point with this is do make sure, obviously, that you've gone through the application procedures, regardless of where you are applying to, and you know the distinctions between the two today or when you apply. And again, we are focusing on the UK personal statement, but the information that we talk about today will be relevant regardless of where you apply. Okay, my next poll for you is how far along are you in writing your personal statement? So again, whether you're applying for US, Canada, UK, wherever you're applying for, how far along are you in developing your personal statement? So again, same thing, QR code, use your mobile phone, pull it up and vote. Otherwise, we will put the link in the chat so you can vote there if you're viewing this from your mobile phone. So you can see the different options. Tell me, have you started yet? You have some ideas, maybe a rough draft, or you've got it perfected. Submit your vote. Okay. So far, 64% haven't started yet. I'm glad you're here today. 80% haven't started yet. Looks like 6% have some ideas on paper but needs work. 6% have a rough draft written, excellent. 2% have it completed and perfected, I'm glad to hear. See more votes still coming in, but it looks like the majority of you haven't started yet. So I hope that you'll find today's session really useful in helping you get started, because I find that that is often the most challenging part. Once you get things down on paper and you start going, it becomes a bit easier. So I think where we're at is 70% haven't started yet. So good to know where everyone is at with regards to your personal statement. So let's get started with some of the basics. Why is a personal statement required? So why is it part of the application process? The main thing is it's addressing two questions that the admissions tutor or whoever's reading your personal statement is thinking about. And the first one is, do they want you in the course? And do they want you at this university? And these questions are really around your interest in the course that you're studying. Are you someone who's genuinely interested in this program and has the skills and capabilities to be successful in that, to handle the amount of rigor and the amount of work involved in this course? So this is really framing what you're writing in your personal statement. So these are the two main things that they are looking for. Do they want you in this course and at this university? In addition to your application, it is the one personal element of your application. So when you submit everything else, that's all very factual. You've got your grades, your transcripts, you've got all the things you've done, but this is the personal element. This is from your point of view, why you want into this course. What is your interest area? So this is your opportunity to stand out from someone who might have similar academic background as yourself in your personal statement. So it's a really important part of your application because it is your personal voice. It's not just numbers and scores, it is your own personal voice. And as I mentioned, it really does help you stand out amongst others, because obviously we know that all applicants are going to receive a lot of applications, and you want to ensure that you stand out for the right reasons. So this will help you distinguish yourself amongst other applicants. And I have a TED Talk here. I'm just going to play the first couple of minutes for you because I think that this is a really good illustration of what you are doing when you are writing your personal statement. So the title of this TED Talk is called The Power of Storytelling. So in this, he talks about how important writing this narrative is. Now he's talking in a different context, but this is still really relevant to what you are doing when you are writing your personal statement. So I'm just going to play the first 2 minutes and then we'll talk about the relevance of this.
Can everybody hear the voice? Paige, can you manage the video's voice, please?
Can you hear the video, Dr. Hamdan?
I can't. Everybody, can you? Please respond in the chat. If you can hear it, do one. Paige, the voice of the video is not on.
Okay, it's still not playing. Okay, no problem.
Okay.
I will just tell you what the video covers. So in this video, what he does is he talks about these objects that are purchased off of eBay. So he goes onto eBay, he buys these objects, 200 different objects, about $1 a piece. He then asks journalists to write a story about an object. So he now has 200 stories about each of these 200 objects. So he puts them back on eBay. So now he's got the same object that he purchased for $1, but it now has a story to it. And what he says is that when he resells those objects, one that you I think may have seen, it was bought for 99 or 95 cents. It was then sold for $65.95. So with that story added, that object that was started off as $1 increased in value significantly. And he says that this is the same approach for all of the different objects. They all increased in value with that story added. So I thought that that was a really nice representation of what exactly you are doing. Amongst 200 different objects, for example, in that video, or amongst 200 different applications, your story, your personal statement can increase your own value, can make you seem more valuable to that admissions tutor who's reading your application. So it is really, really impactful what you are doing when you are writing this personal statement. So then let's talk about preparing to write your personal statement. How do you get started? What to think about? Where do you begin? This is, as we said, the hardest part. First thing I would suggest is research the university's websites, specifically the course that you are looking to apply for, and see what qualities and skills that they are looking for. It's important to know what is important to them. So start with that first, knowing the course. Hopefully you've thought about what course you want to apply for, and then the universities that you're applying for, look and see what skills are valuable to them and jot those down so that you've got a record of what they are looking for. Next thing is start to make a list of things that you want to include in your personal statement. So really reflect on why you're choosing this course. What are some skills that you have? What are things that you're really proud about, achievements? And start just making a list. It doesn't need to make sense to begin with, just get it on paper. And then you always want to start early. So I would start as soon as possible. Again, even if it's not refined or perfected, get words on paper, because the more that you think about it, the more time that you invest in it, the better off you will be. And that's what I've said, is focus on getting things on paper. You'll have time to refine it, create new drafts, revise, edit. You might come up with different ways to word things as you go throughout, but get things down on paper. Now, if you are a bit stuck, UCAS website, for those of you who are applying for the UK specifically, it does have a really helpful worksheet. I have this as a resource at the very end of this presentation, so I'll send this to your counselor and he can send it on to you. But it has a really helpful worksheet if you are still stuck on what to include. But I want to also show you in a subsequent slide another way to get started. So what to include in your personal statement. So as we mentioned, you want to really show demonstration of your interest and enthusiasm for the chosen course or major. And I say demonstration of interest, not just interest, because there is a big difference behind saying, oh, I really like chemistry, to saying chemistry is of interest because I've done these sorts of experiences. So demonstration is important, and I will talk more about this in subsequent slides. When you are, again, thinking of what to include in your personal statement, I find it easy to think of the question words to help guide you for what to include. So the why, that's number one. Why have you chosen this subject? This is what the universities cannot tell from just your application. So why? What triggered the interest in this course that you're choosing? Really focus on that. Then the what. Demonstrate what skills and experience that you have in this chosen area. So you again back it up with some experience. And then how? How do you know you will thrive in the course? So, you know, if you're thinking about a conversation with friends or family and they're asking you, oh, you know, how do you think you'll do in university? If you think, oh, I think I'll be really great. What does that look like to you? How do you know? Is it because you've dealt with, you know, really academic, rigorous courses before? Is it because you know that you're very flexible or determined or whatever it might be? But really start to reflect on these questions so that you can articulate them in your personal statement. All right, so you can include experiences in three major areas. So supercurricular means something that you are demonstrating your interest in outside of school. So it's maybe within the subject area of interest, but it's not sitting in your classroom. So that's one area, one category, I suppose you can group inclusions in. Another is obviously academic, the subjects that you've taken and how those have equipped you with the skills that you need for the specific course or university that you are applying for. And then of course, extracurricular, anything extra that you have done that demonstrates those soft skills or those tangible skills that show that you are a good fit. And I'll talk a little bit about soft skills on a subsequent slide. So as I mentioned, the UCAS website has a really helpful worksheet. Now, it is a bit involved, and for those of you who are visual people, I find something like this to be a little bit helpful. What I've got here is just a very brief chart. I'll talk you through what each kind of section means. If you see here in this first column, I've got activity, just a very general word, but along the left-hand side is where I've put things that maybe you've done throughout your past few years. So for example, maybe you've done some volunteer work. I put an example here. Maybe you volunteered with Sustainable Qatar. And then if you go down the list, maybe you had a part-time job, or you participated in a mentoring program. Maybe you listened to podcasts, or you've done an internship. Anything that you can think about, you can stick it in this column. Oftentimes what we find is that you do so many things and you've got so much going on. Sometimes it's easy to forget everything that you've done. So writing it down, especially as you've done it or as you're doing it, can help you to start to see the things that you've done. So then in the second column, skills and attributes obtained or demonstrated. So then what you want to do is you want to reflect on this experience. So for example, volunteered with Sustainable Qatar. What would you want to tell a university about that experience? If you think about whatever it was you did there, maybe you demonstrated leadership. Perhaps you had to organize a group of volunteers. So you think, yes, this was a really good way for me to show my leadership skills. Perhaps you demonstrated creativity. If you were challenged to come up with a new solution to reducing plastic use or something, maybe you're showing your creativity skills through there. Maybe, environmental awareness. Think about the relevant skills or the relevant attributes that you obtained or demonstrated and jot them down. Be maybe more specific than I was here. This was just to make it short and concise so that you could read it on the slide. But write these things out. Again, this will help you stay organized and help you really to articulate what to include in your personal statement. Then this next column here, relevance to course. So in this column, you identified skills or attributes that you obtained or demonstrated. Then you want to make that connection. Why are those skills or attributes important to the course that you're applying for? So really think about it. So for example, I put, it's important to understand the environmental impact for businesses and the importance of corporate social responsibility. So if you're looking to study business and you're wanting to show that you are interested in sustainable business or corporate social responsibility, whatever it might be, but really reflect on it, because this will be what takes your personal statement to the next level, is if you can make that connection between what you've done to why it's important to that university. So this piece is very critical and really key for you to demonstrate to them. And then I have a final column here for other notes or achievements. Perhaps you received an award that you wanted to mention, so you can write anything else there. This is, again, just a helpful tool for you to get started, but I find particularly for those of you who are really visual, this can help you to start to make those connections. So if you remember at the beginning, we said to ensure that you research the university and what they are looking for. This is the column where you put that, think about the relevance to the course. So feel free to utilize something similar as you go throughout to help you stay organized and know what to put in your personal statement. Okay, so now we have some ideas of at least what to include in our personal statement. So let's talk about the outline. So what do you need to focus on and where? So essentially, your personal statement, as you probably are well aware, is 4,000 characters or 47 lines, which is not a large amount of space. So you want to ensure that you use your space very wisely. Most of the time, you will have about 3 different sections, 3 different paragraphs. They will be very large paragraphs, but you will have about 3 different sections. Your opening paragraph will be about 40% of the total space allocated. Your opening should be interesting and show why you want to enroll in that course. Now, what I want to caution you with the opening paragraph, I said interesting because oftentimes it's very easy to start with, I am interested in this course because, but I would avoid that standard intro because many people use it and it's not as interesting. That will get you lost in the mix. And this is where I know it can be a really big struggle to start writing your personal statement because that is how many people start to write. And what I would say to you is, again, don't focus on the exact words as of yet. Start with getting words on the paper. Sometimes it's easier for people to go back to the end and add in a strong opening sentence, but don't just sit there looking at a blank cursor. If you're uncertain of how to get started, just get started and then you can rework and revise. So you've got your opening paragraph. Then your middle paragraph, which would be another 40% of the allocated space. And this is where you're going to demonstrate the evidence to prove why you're going to be good at the course. Again, evidence, so backing it up with things that you have actually done, with factual things where you can demonstrate your skills and abilities, which is that next bit there. And then your final paragraph is about 20%. So your final paragraph will be a bit shorter, and it's really covering that personal touch. So what makes you unique as a person? How are you going to stand out amongst all the other candidates? So thinking back to the description of the TED Talk, how do you make yourself seem more valuable? So this is where you're going to talk about that, what makes you unique and how you will fit into university life as a whole. So let's go through some tips, some things to do and things not to do. So do stay focused and relevant. Obviously, with a limited number of space, you don't want to start being a bit too general or rambling. You need to stay focused, and the relevance is particularly important. Always reflect back and say, how is this relevant to the course that I'm applying for, to that university? So it's very important to stay focused and relevant. Also, be positive. If you're thinking about, your whys are why are you applying for that specific course? It might be because, you know, you are really interested in that career because it makes a lot of money. Well, that might be great and that might be important to you, but you don't want to tell the academic tutors or the admissions tutors that reason. Or if you think, oh, I really want to study whatever, chemistry because it's the least boring thing to you, again, be positive. So what is it about chemistry or business or geology or whatever it is that has you excited, and focus on those positives. Show rather than tell. I've mentioned this several times already. Provide evidence. They don't want to hear that you like a certain subject. They want to know why, and they want you to back it up with evidence. So that's where that table that we went through might help you provide that evidence. And of course, demonstrate your reflection about those experiences. So again, on that table, the reflection of what did you learn, what did you develop, how did you grow, and how can that be applied? So that demonstration of reflection is particularly important. I've mentioned get words down on paper several times. So let's go to the don'ts. What not to do. So for the personal statement, you don't want to use cliches, humor, or quotes. Cliches would be things like, ever since I was a baby, I wanted to be a doctor, or whatever it might be. You know, that's a bit of a cliche. Of course, when you were a baby, you didn't even know what a doctor was. So it's not something that's really going to add value. So be very mindful of your words and don't use cliches. If you are applying for the US, things like humor could be utilized, but definitely not for the personal statement. So the personal statement is very factual, very evidence driven, and really about that why. So you don't want to use humor in your personal statement. And you also don't want to use quotes. They want to hear from you. That's why it's called a personal statement. So make sure that the words are your own. Okay, also, you don't want to state the importance of the course in general. They know why their course is important in the world, but you want to talk about to you. Why is it important? So I know that there's a bit of a gray area between those two, but focus for you. What was that aha moment? This is what I want to study, and focus on that rather than the contributions of this course to the world as a whole. Don't copy. It goes without saying. They do use a program called Copycat where they can tell if it has been copied. So I know that there are plenty of examples online. It can be very tempting to utilize some of the same wording, but don't do it because it could get your application rejected altogether. So just avoid that altogether. And don't be arrogant. I'll give you an example of this coming up, but you want to, again, be very factual, be very honest, be very positive, but don't sound arrogant. And again, like I said, I'll show you an example of this. So once you've started to formulate your personal statement, it's also important to think about what the admissions tutors themselves are thinking about. So things like, does the student have the necessary qualities and qualifications for the course? Is the student conscientious, hardworking, unlikely to drop out? And I want to touch on this one when they say, is a student hardworking? When you are writing your personal statement, if, for example, you know you're a hard worker and you want to emphasize that because you know that this course is going to require a lot of hard work, you want to be more articulate than simply saying, I'm a hard worker. Because what does that look like? If simply saying I'm a hard worker could mean a lot of different things, and it doesn't really help the admissions tutor to visualize who you are as a person and what hard work means to you. So if you are wanting to focus on the fact that you're a really hard worker, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? Does that mean that you've sought out other opportunities in your field? Does that mean you've helped other students who perhaps needed some extra guidance in the course? Does that mean you were always on time or stayed late or whatever that means to you? But make sure whenever you talk about these that you avoid using these generalities as just simply saying hardworking, and make sure you provide that evidence and be specific like we talked about. So other questions that they're considering: will you be able to adjust to your new environment at university? So are you going to be adaptable, flexible? Is this going to be something, a setting where you thrive in? They're also looking at what are your communication skills like, and are you dedicated to this course, and have you researched it well? So all of these things are questions to keep in your mind when you are writing your personal statement, because these are some things that they are going to really reflect on. So again, Once you've written your chart, if you choose to use that, that might be a good way to start extracting out some of these things that they are looking for and think about how you can word them in your personal statement. Okay, so I have a challenge for you. We're going to go through some samples together. I have 2 samples of introductions. I want to go through each one. We will read them together, and then once we've looked at the 2 intros, I have a poll where, again, I want you to vote and you tell me which example you think is the best. Now, again, this is just the intro. So it's just the first bit of 2 different examples. So we'll read through it together and then you tell me which one you think is the strongest. So the first intro, this is for English course. I'll read it to you. Only the very weak-minded refuse to be influenced by literature and poetry. Cassandra Clare, Clockwork Angel. I feel this quote reflects my own thirst for knowledge, and that's why I've had a love of reading from a young age, right from the time I could read The Very Hungry Caterpillar. These days, my literary interests are rather more sophisticated. After all, there's nothing like Ulysses to show off one's superior intelligence when indulging in my favorite activity, reading, in a coffee shop. I'm never happier than when I'm reading, and that's why I want to study BA English Language and Literature at Oxford. That and the G&D's ice cream, of course. Jokes. Okay, so that's sample intro 1. Let's look at sample intro 2. This is for business. So again, I'll read this one to you and then I'll give you a chance to vote. So I hadn't realized just how many elements are involved in the success of a business until I started my extended essay. Common elements between the economics and geography courses, specifically the leisure, sport, and tourism topic, inspired me to focus on the effect of the winter tourism industry of Switzerland on the local gross domestic product of alpine regions. Ultimately, I concluded that climate change has been a factor in the gradual decline of revenue in the winter tourism industry in Gstaad Sonnenland. I studied articles from various sources, including the Woerstifun magazine and annual business publications of the local tourism bureau, Gstaad Sonnenland Tourismus, spanning a 10-year period. These provided me with a deeper understanding of the interdependence of local businesses, such as the BDG, hotels and sports businesses, and their common dependence on snow reliability. I realized that my interest in management and business covered a wide range of subjects as businesses combined financial, environmental, political, and economic factors. Okay, so with those 2 sample intros being read, so sample 1 was English, sample 2 is business, I want you to, using the QR code, vote and tell me which intro do you think is the strongest. So again, just hover your phone over the QR code. Once you vote, we'll be able to see what everyone thought. And we'll put the link in the Q&A if you are on your mobile phone. So take a second, tell me which one you think is the strongest. So we have a couple votes coming in so far. Looks like at the moment, 83% are saying intro 2, 92% now intro 2. See, more votes are coming in. 95% for intro 2 so far. 97%. 94. See more votes coming in. 95% so far for intro 2, so an overwhelming amount think intro 2. Still coming in, but I will move on. Those of you who voted for intro 2, you are correct. And let's talk about why that intro for the second example was stronger. So we'll first examine this first intro. So the first statement you notice is a quote. Now, if you remember back to the slide, the do's and don'ts, one of the don'ts was use a quote. So the very first line in this personal statement is a quote, which are not the person's own words. And even to that point, the book itself, Clockwork Angel, is not a great literary work. It would be, I think, a young adult's book, but it's not even something that would, demonstrate, philosophical thinking or whatnot. So you don't want to start off with a quote. So already, this is not a very strong start for this intro. Then you see things like thirst for knowledge and from a young age. These are, again, going back to the don'ts on that slide, these are cliches. They are cliches for a reason because they are utilized so frequently and they don't, again, provide a lot of value. So thirst for knowledge from a young age, since I was born, all of these things you want to try to avoid using and be more specific. Okay, so then you see that they mentioned from the time they could read The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So The Very Hungry Caterpillar is a children's book. Again, it doesn't really add a lot of value to the admissions tutors who are reading your personal statement. So something to consider there. Let's keep looking. So then this little bit sounds a bit arrogant, right? I imagine you all are nodding your head on the other side of the screen. But when you read this, it sounds like the person is kind of, full of themselves. They're saying, my literary interests are rather more sophisticated. After all, there's nothing like Ulysses to show off one's superior intelligence. So that's not how you want to come across to the admissions tutors. You want to sound knowledgeable and factual. This just sounds a little bit arrogant. So you want to avoid utilizing that kind of language. And then, of course, the last bit there, they said that and the G&D's ice cream jokes, again, might be fun to read and we might laugh and smile, but that's not what you're wanting to do in your personal statement. So if you remember, again, back to the don'ts, we said don't utilize humor. So having this bit of a joke and even using that informal tone, again, not going to stand out for the right reasons to the admissions tutors. So those are some what not to do's. So then let's look at that second example that most of you selected as the strongest. So starting off, the intro gives a practical example of interest in the course. So he talks about, or this person talks about, the different elements involved in business when they started studying their extended essay. So already we know business is their interest, and we know that they have some experience doing research about it with their extended essay. So already we've gotten that practical connection to the course and some experience that they've done. Then in the kind of middle part of their intro, it mentions specific sources that they studied. So it's very specific. As we said, show, don't tell. So this person could have said, I've researched a lot of different sources on this topic, but that would have been too general and vague. Rather, the person said, I studied articles from various sources, including, and they talked about the magazine, the annual business publication, and they listed them out, and they even said spanning a 10-year period. So we've got specifics. We know exactly what this person has researched. So this is that super curricular, showing, okay, they're interested in business. What are some things that they're doing that demonstrate their interest in business outside of curriculum? And so this would be an example of that. And then the last little bit here, they demonstrate the understanding of the various factors affecting business. So they say here at the end, I realized that my interest in management and business covered a wide range of subjects, including financial, environmental, political, and economic factors. So these are some reasons why this intro would be a stronger intro to the last example. So then let's take a look at the body section. So if you remember, the intro should be about 40% of the total space allocated. Your body should be the next 40%. Now I have this broken up into 2 paragraphs just to make it easier for you to read on this slide. But when you're writing it, this would generally be 1 paragraph. Again, when you've got only 47 lines, you want to use each one wisely. So we'll read through this together and then we'll discuss why we think it's a good example. So this is for an engineering course. So this isn't the first 2, this is a different course. So this is the body of an engineering application. So it says, during a month's summer placement, I undertook research on a small fraction of the polymers NASA develops each year, and each one grabbed my interest with its various attributes. Due to their unique properties, Each different material required its own polishing and etching procedure, preparing it for examination. The endless ways in which these materials and their preparations varied, even when their structure differed by a minute change, fascinated me. Sparked by innovations I saw around me at NASA, like the refinement of copper screening to protect aircraft from lightning strikes, I visualized the improvements possible with each new polymer. While examining materials under a scanning electron microscope, I learned how microdeformations affect a material's performance, causing variations from expected behavior. I explored how changing the microstructure of a material by heat treatment drastically changes its performance through the process of friction stir welding, less subject to failure than a regularly welded seam. Through this internship, I expanded upon my knowledge from AP Physics B of how systems responded to external stresses. I began revising my hypothesis of how a system would act under different conditions based on what materials comprised it. During AP Physics C, Mechanics, I applied this knowledge to a problem set when I realized the rubber tires of the car in question would deform and cause deviations in predicted behavior. So this is the body of a personal statement for engineering. Now, whether you're an engineering person or not, and maybe some of those words you think, oh, I'm definitely not in applying for engineering, you can still get the gist of what they're saying and how they're saying it by those examples that they talk about. So I want to highlight the importance or what we think is the structure of this. So in this first little bit, they link their extracurriculars with their skills and the course. So right from the start of this body, we know about their internship with NASA. We learn about their skills. So they talk about each different material requires this. They sparked by innovations. They visualize the improvements. So again, we're making that link between their extracurricular, some of the specific skills that they demonstrated, and the course that they are interested in applying for. Then the second section again provides more evidence of the application of knowledge. So we see a connection with the courses. So again, if you think about that table that we talked about, if you write down some of the relevant courses and the skills and knowledge that you've developed and obtained, then demonstrating that relevance. So they talk about AP Physics B, AP Physics C, Mechanics. Then they say exactly how they applied this knowledge. So it's showing again that connection. So that evidence of what they've learned in the course and how they've connected it. Okay. So then let's go through one sample conclusion and then we'll talk a little bit further about that. So this is from the same body, the same engineering personal statement. This would be the conclusion. Now again, on the screen you see it as 2 paragraphs. I simply did that to save space or to make it easier to read, but whenever you are writing your personal statement, you want it to be more condensed so that you utilize that space wisely. So let's read through this. It says, my love of classical maths and physics dovetailed perfectly with the applied principles of engineering I had explored. While studying trigonometry, I became intrigued by polar functions. I loved how the infinite oscillations of a trigonometric function could be transformed into a spiral or curved shape in polar form. I immediately recognized the applications for the system of coordinates. Systems of navigation could easily calculate distance without the Pythagorean theorem. In AP Calculus BC, I began to apply my knowledge of integration from AP Calculus AB to more complex situations in different types of functions, including polar. I applied these calculus techniques in AP Physics C, electricity, and magnetism to real-life situations. For example, we used integration coupled with Gauss's law to determine the electric field at a given distance away from an infinite wire, often a consideration when engineering electrical systems. As a cellist, I found myself inexorably, drawn to music because of the ever-varying mathematical combinations that underlie melodies. Complex interactions between the vibrations of the string and the soundboard, honed by early engineers, produced the music. The world is built by engineers, and I too want to build new innovative solutions and understand the complexities of the world's many systems. So again, whether you're an engineering person or not, you can start to see the connections here. Now, I will say in this second paragraph, they did focus quite a bit on their studies, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So let's talk about this a little bit. First section, link between academic course and the uni course. Always going to be important, again, showing that reflection, that demonstration of how you will apply your knowledge and skills. Then supporting evidence and specific examples. So they mention here, for example, we utilized this technique. This is exactly what you want to do because you're helping the admissions tutor start to visualize yourself in the lab or wherever it might be, see what kind of a student, what kind of a worker, what kind of a learner you are. So that's very helpful for them to visualize how you will do in the course as well as in uni. And then the personal touch. So you see here they say as a cellist. So we now know that they're a musician as well, which makes them unique, makes them stand out a little bit. And I think it's really great how they linked their interest in music to the engineering course. So that's something that helps them stand out. That's that 20% we talked about at the end of the conclusion for your personal touch. So that was a really good connection. And then lastly, the closing statement there. The world is built by engineers, and I too want to build new innovative solutions and understand the complexities of the world's many systems. It might be a little bit general. If you can be a little bit more specific, that would be good, but it's nice at the end of your personal statement to have some sort of closing statement that kind of summarizes what you've discussed. So keep that in mind as you're writing your personal statement. Finish strong. That way they remember. So have something at the end that kind of summarizes everything you've talked about. So we're almost coming up to question time. So I just want to reiterate a few things. The first thing I want to touch on the importance of is that what you are doing in writing this personal statement is not just a one-off. It's not just for your university applications, but this practice of getting experience, reflecting on that experience, and connecting those experiences with your future goals is really important throughout your career. Whenever you start applying for jobs, you will have to write a cover letter, and writing a cover letter is very, very similar to what you are doing with this application. Maybe some of you have already written cover letters before, but this is a lifelong learning process. So what you are working on right now is something that you will actually still utilize throughout your career. So the more that you get in the habit of really articulating the skills, the interest, the characteristics that you developed in these experiences, reflecting on that, and then applying those to your future goals, the better off you will be. Then you will have no problem writing cover letters and things in the future. So I just wanted to highlight, this isn't a once-off. Once you write it, that's great, but these skills are skills that you will develop and utilize for life. So just to summarize what we've talked about today before I open it up for questions. Firstly, start early. After today, I know on a Thursday afternoon, this is probably the first thing you want to do, but start jotting some ideas down on paper. Even, as we've been speaking, maybe you've been jotting down ideas, but start early. Get some things on paper. It doesn't need to make sense. You don't even have to have them in complete sentences. Use dot points, whatever you prefer. Start as soon as possible because it does take time. Demonstrate your motivation and your skills and experience through specific examples. Avoid being general, avoid those cliches like I really like this subject, but show them that you are interested in this subject through specific examples of what you have done. So that's really important. No admissions tutor is going to say, oh, remember that student who said they liked English? No, but what they will say is, remember that student who said that they were really interested in discussing the complexities of literature and debating about Chaucer or whatever it might have been. Those are the things that stick with them. So that's what you want to focus on, are those specific examples. Craft your narrative, help them visualize you as a person, and think about what makes you stand out. Of course, there are unique things about you, so think about what those are and include those in your personal statement, making that connection to the course that you're planning on studying. Naturally, stay focused to the point. With a limited amount of space, you don't have a lot of room to go off on tangents, so stay focused, stay to the point, and continually revise and edit. You will probably go through multiple drafts of your personal statement, and that's fine and that's expected. So that's why we say start early. because you want to continually tweak, continually revise, and continually edit that until you feel very happy that you've got it at a point where when that admissions tutor reads it, it's going to go in that yes pile. So continually revise and edit. As I mentioned, I have some additional resources. I will send this presentation out where you can access these resources. I'll send it to your counselor and he can send it on to you. The one I mentioned is the UCAS handout. It does go through some questions about what to think about for writing your personal statement, so that can be really helpful. So I have a survey, but before we jump to the survey, I would like to open it up for questions. So I don't know if any questions have been typed so far. I'll take a look, but now is your chance to ask questions, and we can answer them, myself and Dr. Hamda, and see what we can do to support you.
So guys, I'll be your voice. So a lot of people asking about sharing the presentation. So if we want to go back to that point again.
Yes, so I will be sharing the presentation. I will most likely send it to your counselor and he can then send it out, but yes, you will receive a copy of the presentation, absolutely.
One question said, how long should the presentation, the personal statement be?
So for the UCAS applications, if you're applying for the UK, it is 4,000 characters or 47 lines. So that's the requirement for that one. If you're applying elsewhere, just take a look at those requirements and it will tell you specifically, but you definitely want to ensure that you stay within the length or the amount of space that they do give you. And so with the 47 lines, I think it ends up being just over maybe a page and a half or so, a little over a page. And again, 47 lines, and that's why most of the time it's 3 just solid paragraphs, that intro, the body, and the closing.
Lovely. So with other questions we have, we answered that one. Can the opening paragraph begins with a quote?
I wouldn't recommend it. From that example we look at, starting off with a quote is almost like you don't have your own words to say, and you want your words to be what's most impactful to that admissions tutor. So if there's something that you think is meaningful, maybe incorporate it, but using your own words. So I would definitely avoid utilizing quotes if possible.
Another question says that, is it true that some universities don't ask for personal statements?
You would need to check specifically. For UCAS applications, they do. If you're applying elsewhere in the world, it would depend on their requirements, so just double check that. But I would always say, and this applies even for job applications as well or whatever, but if they say it's optional, I would always include it. It might be easier not to include it if someone says it's optional, but it's your chance to stand out and to tell those whys. You know, why are you choosing this subject? So again, UCAS, it's required. Other regions might not be, so look it up, make sure that you know that. And again, if it says optional, I would always still include a personal statement. So
there's another question, says, would it be appropriate to include extracurricular activities which do not directly related to the course you're applying for?
That's a really great question. So what I would think about is with the extracurricular activity, did you demonstrate a transferable skill or a soft skill? So things like leadership or communication or organization or things like that, and then can you relate that skill to the course? So if you know it's going to require strong leadership skills or great organizational skills, can you make that connection? Because you do want this to be really relevant. So if there's an extracurricular activity you participated in that you feel particularly strongly about, you think, yes, I know I achieved a lot, I demonstrated a lot of skills, then think of how you can make a connection. It doesn't need to be in your field, for example, but if you can show that it, demonstrates you have excellent communication skills, maybe you're really good at problem solving, and why might those be important to the course? So that's what I would do. I would definitely try to include it, but examine the skill that you demonstrated and how that might be relevant to the course.
Another question says, does a personal statement change if you are applying to an art university like VCU or another university? So does it change when I'm applying to different universities?
So, for example, if you're applying for VCU, so that would be different than the UCAS system. So with those, you would want to make sure that you take a look. It would be more the standard essay. So I would ensure that whatever region you are applying for, you take a look at what are the requirements in that application process. And it will be a little bit different if it's, not in the UK or if it's in the US. Each of those will be a little bit different, and you want to make sure that you know those distinctions and that you tailor what you write based on those requirements.
Another question says, can you include a personal story that inspired you to choose the course in your personal statement, or would it be considered a cliche?
You certainly can include a personal story. Now, depending on what exactly your story is, you just want to be very mindful. You don't want to take up too much space, but what they are wanting to hear is, what inspired you to study what you're studying. If there's a nice and concise way that you can mention what sparked your interest, then absolutely include that. Just again, be mindful of how much space you devote to talking about the story. You want to be concise, but of course do mention what sparked your interest in this field, and it won't be cliche.
A question, is it a good idea to start a personal statement as to when we realize this is what we wanted to?
So I think I might expand on that question a little bit. If you haven't yet decided maybe what course you're applying for or what course you want to apply for, I think you can still start to maybe outline that table as I demonstrated. So think about, what have you done? What have you participated in? What skills did you demonstrate? But in regards to writing the personal statement, you can start with maybe a few things, but it will be a little bit harder because you don't know what you're applying for. So I would say get what you've done down on a piece of paper in a chart or whatever, but then once you have determined what course you're wanting to apply for, that's when I would really start to work on writing it out in a personal statement format.
Another question says, is it better to be on the lower end of word count than the higher end?
I would say it doesn't necessarily really matter. What matters is what you say. So it's not how much do you say, it is the value and the impact of what you say. With that being said, 47 lines is not really a great deal. So I would try to ensure that you do talk about enough content to really help them visualize you. So I think when you find that you start writing it out, that you will probably be on the longer end. And then you can start trimming things down. But if you've got a lot of space remaining, I would definitely try to add more to that. You don't want to only have, one short paragraph or something like that. So you want to utilize the space that's given to you, but it's not about having exactly 4,000 characters or 47 lines. It's about the impact of what you say and the content and the relevance.
Another question says, from what age should information be included? Is it from primary school?
This is a really good question. It depends again on the relevance. I wouldn't really go back to primary school, to be honest, because who you were in primary school is different from who you are now. You want to try to give recent and relevant examples. Now, if there's something that you did in an earlier age that can demonstrate maybe strong interest or something, and you want to mention it briefly, that might be okay. But again, they're really wanting to hear what is relevant, what's current. So I wouldn't go back too far. I would try to think of, within the last few years, honestly. But again, if there's something that really helps demonstrate your motivation or your interest, maybe mention it very, very briefly. Don't spend too much time on it, though.
A question says, how important and necessary are motivational letters from teachers? I would think you mean personal letter.
Yeah, I think that they're referring to the reference letters by the teachers.
Yes.
Yep. So those are very important as well. So the admissions tutor, they'll look at the academic side, the transcript, all of that. They will then look at, or not necessarily in this order, but they will refer to your personal statement as well as your teacher's reference letter. So each thing plays its important part, and they are all important for your application as a whole.
So the presentation page again will be sent to the counselor?
Yes, I will send it to the counselor, and I realize that it is at 3 o'clock. So I don't know if there are still quite a few questions or not, but I do want to take the time to do a quick closing, and then I can stay on for a few minutes if anyone has additional questions. But I've got this QR code here for the survey. I would love for each of you to provide some feedback. Let me know what you thought of today's session. You can use your mobile phone to access the survey, or we can put the link in the chat. But please do give us some feedback. And I also just want to thank you all for spending your Thursday afternoon listening to me speak. Hopefully you all found it very valuable. Personal statement writing, I know, can be really stressful, but it also can be really fun. It's, you know, an interesting process to reflect on your own experiences and to write about them to someone who's going to be reading them for your application. So best of luck with all of those. If I haven't gotten to your question, I will stick on for a few more minutes and try to answer any others. But as I said, please do take the time to complete the survey, and thank you very much for spending your afternoon with me.
So let's get into two other questions. What if you currently don't have any experience or any extracurricular activities?
So if you don't currently have anything, first of all, I would reflect really hard, because some people say, oh, I don't really have experience, but maybe you have done things that you just don't think count as experience. So things even like job shadowing might be useful. Things like listening to podcasts, or maybe you've read magazines that are relevant to your field. Maybe you find yourself watching informative videos online. So things can still count. So really reflect hard and think about what else have you done, because I think you might actually have done some things that you haven't yet thought of. But then I would also think about what else can you do right now that would maybe help for you to get some experience and to think about what you can talk about. But I would certainly say there probably are things that you've done that you might not be aware of as of yet.
I want to go back. There is a lot of question about sharing the presentation and the recording of the video. So if you can tap on that again.
Yes, we will be sharing the presentation, and we've also recorded it. So I will get the recording to you. It will be coming through next week, so that will be available to you.
Thank you very much. Everybody is thanking you, Paige. Me, myself also.
Again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Hope that you found this session valuable, and best of luck with your applications. Have fun with it, reflect on things, and good luck.